I've been revisiting a lot of PSVR2 games recently in my own time, including Skydance's Behemoth for a second playthrough, Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 8, Horizon Call the Mountain, with some being turned into videos like Phasmophobia the other day, and today is another one of those but in a bit of a different light, because today we're talking about Vertigo 2, a game I hailed as a masterpiece for its gameplay, story and mechanics at launch, and the only sour point for it was the performance and lack of PSVR2 features. After playing through it again in present day, and with the knowledge that the game runs significantly better on PS5 Pro, I thought it'd be good to revisit it about a year later to see how this stacks up against the rest of the competition on PSVR2 in terms of these big story games you can sink quite a few hours into and get a lot out of. Before we jump in though, only 25% of you are subscribed, so please feel free to do so, and thank you to our patrons and YouTube members for bringing this content straight to you. With that being said, let's revisit Vertigo 2. The first thing that really hit me was the resolution of this game. After a year away from it and playing some games that genuinely look stunning at high resolution, like Behemoth that runs at 90 frames per second as well, which is the frame rate that Vertigo 2 targets on PSVR 2, it really hit me in the face that Vertigo 2 is not a great looking game in terms of resolution. Now this does subside a little bit, you do get used to it, but when going back and forth between several titles like I have been for the past couple of weeks, it really makes that glaring difference all the more noticeable. There's one main reason for this really, and that is dynamic foveated rendering. Vertigo 2 simply doesn't use it. I don't know whether this was a decision on the developer's part or Perp Games, who did, I think, the porting for it, but it seems to be a trend with some Perp Games titles that it doesn't use DFR. For others, I think it's not too bad, the games run fine, but in terms of the visuals and the performance here, it was clear that DFR was needed. Focusing just on the visual side of things, there's quite a lot of aliasing, the resolution isn't very high, and even if it was a marginal boost with DFR in terms of visuals, I would have taken it, obviously. A similar example to this can be found in Phasmophobia. With the recent update, turning on DFR makes some things a little bit more legible, but overall isn't that big of an improvement, but even that I would have taken for Vertigo 2, because sharpening it up just that little bit more would have made all the difference. However, that doesn't change the fact that Vertigo 2's style and visual design is nothing short of stunning. While the assets might not look incredibly AAA or anything, it's because I believe they're all made by hand, and they're made by a very small team or just this solo developer. With that in mind, the game is kind of a marvel. There's so many different environments, and most of them end up looking really, really good. Of course they're stylized, but on a visual and creative level, the enemy designs, weapon designs, environmental designs, everything stands out as top class. The word I'd use is simply creative. That's what Vertigo 2 feels like, and that's what it is all the way through. It's a very creative game in how it designs encounters and visuals. That's another thing that still stands the test of time this year later, after playing through Metro, Alien, Behemoth, all these releases that have happened in the last year. Vertigo 2's gameplay still hits that mark of feeling fun. The biggest comparison I can give it to is Halo Combat Evolved. In that game, I can jump in 20 plus years later because the combat feels well designed. Each of the enemy types in that game, from the original Xbox era, hit properly. They all feel like different chess pieces that move in one game that make you try and figure out what to take out first to really ensure your success, and Vertigo 2 is the same. Each environment has vastly different enemies for you to fight, and each of them act in a different way that make you rethink and re-strategize what weapons you're going to use and how you're going to approach them. It's such a fresh thing to see in VR, and often we get games that recycle the same enemies all the time. Vertigo 2 is not that, and a year later I still think it's above the rest in terms of VR enemy design. Another one is music. The soundtrack won my game OST of the year last year for PSVR 2. It was between this and Vendetta Forever, which I do now wish I'd given a mention because that was pretty incredible too, but Vertigo 2 soundtrack just sticks with you. Whether it's funny motifs for characters or entrances to grand levels that are underscored by incredible music, these tracks are memorable, and the biggest showcase of that is that I haven't forgotten them a year later and smiled when I recognized each of them going through from area to area. The story as well is still great, despite the protagonist being silent. The other dialogue is well written, well voice acted, and tells a cohesive and good narrative from start to finish, with a couple of choices you can actually make along the way. The dialogue is quirky without feeling overly annoying, and certain moments like meeting Nanny at the boat store were ones that I was really looking forward to on my revisit, and having moments like that is definitely a good sign. All those things I just listed though are sort of subjective to me. I know a lot of other people share those opinions, especially in the PCVR space where the game is a lot more optimized. But even the PSVR 2 players who've played this game, most of them I think agree with that consensus that all those elements are bloody fantastic, but the more objective things like the performance are where the game has pitfalls. In terms of bugs, I found the game is actually pretty good right now. I ran into one where I got stuck in a certain object and I reloaded my save, but the save was only about a minute before I reached that point, so I really didn't lose much progress at all. Of course that's not ideal, but having one instance of that in about 12 hours was really not too bad. In my initial playthrough as well, pre-release, I didn't run into too many bugs either, maybe one or two. And I said as much in my initial review, but I know a lot of other people did run into essentially getting soft-locked with certain bugs and things not spawning, and a bunch of crashes, and luckily, none of that for me on this playthrough. A different story is the performance. Now, before launch, the performance wasn't amazing in certain areas. One I can think of is the Hut Forest. It's massive open expanse with a load of vistas to see, and once you step into it, the frame rate tanks. Same with the Civil War level. With so many NPCs and things going on, the frame rate gets choppy. Pre-release, it was certainly playable, but it wasn't great. Post-release, it seemed to have gotten worse when I revisited it last year, and now it's a little better, but still not great. If you can stomach a bad frame rate on the base PS5, you should be alright with it, and I think the game is still worth experiencing. But if you're a new player, definitely leave it a good while until you even think about approaching Vertigo 2, because it is just not that well optimized. That's where DFR could come in and actually be a game changer in terms of performance. Honestly, I'm less fussed about the visual quality, because it is good enough to play through. It's more about the performance of something like DFR coming in that would really polish it up and fix it. On PS5 Pro though, it seems from people's testing that the game runs silky smooth, so no problems there. If you got the PS5 Pro, go for it. There's also a lack of PSVR2 features as well to this day. Now these have been really heavily requested, 2-perp games to do, but unfortunately never happened because there's no headset rumble, there's no adaptive triggers, and I do actually kick myself a lot for not mentioning these in my initial review. I was so kind of dumbstruck by how great the game was in my opinion, that these platform-specific features I just didn't really notice, when I usually do, and that's on me. But now after playing through it again, yeah, these are sorely missed and would have been really, really cool to have, especially with the different weapon types that Vertigo 2 has. The beam weapons could continually kick back on the triggers. The more heavy weapons like the skewer could give you headset rumble. There could be different tensions in the trigger for the shotguns and pistols. There are so many different avenues they could have gone down, and yet we got nothing. Same with the level editor. This was promised after launch and nothing came, and some people have really claimed false advertising because of that, and to be honest, I don't blame them. Being completely straight up and honest, I had no idea that was not going to happen pre-launch. Everything I was told pre-launch was that the level editor was going to be included after launch, and yeah, didn't happen. Same with the new Vertigo 2 DLC that's coming out on PC. No idea if that's coming to PSVR 2, and I'd probably lean towards the answer being no more than yes at this point in time, but we'll have to wait and see. Overall, I still really enjoyed the journey of Vertigo 2. It still blew me away almost as much as it did the first time, but these issues did rear their head a little bit more for me this time because I wasn't as wowed by seeing the game's sights and sounds for the first time like I did early last year. Overall though, if you've got a PS5 Pro, I'd say go for it. If you don't, but can handle some pretty choppy frame rates in 1 or 2 levels, also go for it. But other than that, probably steer clear, and I hate to say that because the game is so incredible. But if you really get affected by motion sickness, you are going to have a horrendous time here. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Please let me know what you think of Vertigo 2 in the comments below, and I hope to see you all in the next one.